today's webinar from the Open Group, which as you can see is today being brought to us by Evolution Software, and we're lucky again to have Dr. Tim O'Neill of Evolution presenting to us today. I'll hand over to Tim. I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping points to keep the event moving forward smoothly. Firstly, probably most importantly with regards to questions, we would of course encourage you to submit questions. It's a great opportunity to directly communicate with Tim. If you'd like to submit a question, please ask you to write your question into the Q&A text facility. If you write a question in there, can I ask you to address it to all or all participants? That one gets to see all the questions that have been submitted. Plans are to try and answer as many questions at the end of Tim's presentation today. Now, today's event is being fully recorded, so if for a reason you have to leave early, or if you experience any local technical difficulties, and that sometimes audio can be problematical at times, then everyone who's registered for today's event will email with the appropriate link where they can access that recording, and that will be coming out tomorrow. So, Reddy, can I ask you to start today's presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that introduction, Simon. So, yep, welcome everybody. I can see there's a really large turnout. So it's some slides to go through today. The topic being 5 quick wins that will give enterprise architecture an edge. So what I'm sort of want to do is just sort of share some experience that I've got over the last sort of 20 years of doing this that I've seen as very effective. Value of what we do as enterprise architects, and obviously helps us to be better received by the business. So I think we've got an hour, so we'll sort of see how we go for time. I mean, obviously I'm hoping there should be time at the end for questions, as Simon alluded to, so type your questions in the Q&A facility. If we get through the questions that are there, I know that I can, Simon will forward them through to me, and we can kind of respond to them directly offline. That's fine. So don't. Okay, so just a quick word. Who am I? As Simon said, I'm Tim O'Neill. I've got about 25 years experience in this field of enterprise architecture, working with large corporations, sort of global 2000 as they're called. I've been working with the Open Group now for many years. I've helped to, I've contributed strongly to the TOGAF standard in the Architecture Forum, and also the Archimate standard in the Archimate Forum. For years I was the co-chair of the Tools Certification Committee, so I've got lots of experience there as well. Separate to my work with the Open Group, I've been involved in many other academic pursuits, if I was to say that. So I certainly am a research fellow at the University of Technology in Sydney, as well as working at Evolution. And as Simon mentioned, Evolution is a spin-out for the University of Technology in Sydney. So I sort of have my feet in both camps, both industry and in academia. On Evolution, the company, so they're the ones that are producing a product called Abacus, which is one of the enterprise architecture tools in the market. Global reach, Evolution now has customers in well over 100 countries, 2,000 companies, and me, indeed, over 3,000 what we refer to as Abacus certified engineers. So there's a whole certification program our users can go through. Offices all around the world. I'm based out of our London office here in the UK. Obviously, the company started in Australia with the University of Technology there, which is where I'm from originally, but as I said, I'm now based here in the UK. Across all the verticals, so different industries, finance, consumer, government, all that sort of stuff. Have been so for 15 years, and we've had great growth, over 30% year on year. And of course, we don't do everything directly. We work with partners all around the world. So we've got 50 key partners that we work with in different countries everywhere. The topic, as you know, is about quick wins. Just wanted to draw your attention to some work that Gartner's done. There's a URL down the bottom of this page here. It's what they call Peer Insights. The Insights is an open forum, so any of you can access it. You don't need to be a Gartner client to do so. What it does, though, is it allows people to sort of basically give reviews. So it's the good, open, fair, albeit vetted by Gartner. So they certainly do go through and make sure it's not the vendor submitting the review and things like that. But it's a really good place to get some honest opinions on the different tools that are out there. One of the dimensions, they do ask people to sort of fill in a survey or a bit of a questionnaire. One of the dimensions that Gartner always talks about is what they call time to value. It has several factors. So there's factors around how quickly can the tool be deployed, how robust is the tool, all that sort of stuff. And one of the metrics they have there is this chart that I'm showing, which talks about the deployment time by vendor. So I've obfuscated away the other vendors. I didn't want to do anything like that, try and spruik any things like that. But you can see the second row there is the evolution row. And what it's talking about here, the blue bar is clients of ours that have been deployed in under 3 months. The green bar is then between 3 and 6 months. So what you can actually see here is our clients, and you can see the statistics there, 73% of them deployed in under 3 months. So that's quite fast. And indeed 93% in under 6 months, which is certainly the best on the market you can see there. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is I guess we know what we're talking about when it comes to getting some quick wins. We seem like we're the best tool for getting in the hands of the users and getting them being productive as quick as possible, certainly in excess of 90% within 6 months. So have a look at some of the other statistics that are there, see the other things that are of interest to you. I think you'll find some pretty good information. Simon said actually, obviously, that these slides will be available, so we'll send these slides tomorrow if you say, writing down that URL there at the bottom. So let's get on to the meat of the presentation. So the 5 quick wins that we've seen give enterprise architecture an edge. They're going to call something is better than nothing. Okay, so the first quick win. Now, I'm sure all of you recognise that as the Sydney Opera House in the harbour, in Sydney Harbour, one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. I'm not sure how many of you know the history of how that came to be, but what happened was essentially back in the late 1940s and then through to the 1950s, the New South Wales government put out a competition to have an architect design an opera house that they believe be a world landmark. There were 200 submissions from all around the world. One of the submissions was from a Danish architect named Jan Ertsen. And the trouble they had with it was obviously the submissions were all just drawings and sketches and things like that, and they really struggled to understand his vision of what he was trying to communicate. Sydney, as you'd all know, is a harbour city. It's a pleasure harbour, so there's sailing and all that. What he was trying to obviously communicate was this shape of the building here was reflecting the sails of the boats that were on the harbour. And he was struggling to get his opinion across, and indeed in the first review of submissions it was rejected. There was another colleague who certainly said, look, I think you should give the guy a chance. And he jumped on a plane, brought a model with him, which is this model you see here, and presented it to the steering committee. And the man on the right there is actually the premier. And needless to say, he won the deal. So by building a model, he was able to convince people to do something that otherwise they never would have done. Okay. Now, with the caveat there, of course, that models are wrong, but some are useful. So you actually need to have something to be successful. And this model here, there's lots of differences if you look closely. There's certainly no trees ultimately around the Opera House. The sails are in a different configuration now with the actual built building. But a model is very useful. It helps people, in this case, build a building, which is obviously a landmark in the world. So something is certainly better than nothing. If we put that into the context of what we do as enterprise architects, what we're basically looking at here is, traditionally people are using the Microsoft Visio, PowerPoint, Excel way of doing things, and it really doesn't cut it. We all know that. You need to have some sort of central repository, some global, reference place for people to go. But don't necessarily reinvent the wheel. There's hundreds of frameworks or notations out there to choose from. Obviously, with the Open Group, there's the Open Group Architecture framework, TOGAF, and Archimate there, so these are really good places to start. But really, focus on this fact of not reinventing the wheel and the number of hybrids that exist. We in Evolution have made hybrids of different frameworks and mashed them together into a whole that we know is cohesive. And if you look at some of the research from Gartner here in what they call the critical capability analysis, they rated Abacus, which is that first column there on the right here. This is the Abacus ratings as being, as you can see here, the best repository or meta model on the market. It's indeed the only one that scored 4.0 in any of the categories. So certainly the repository we have in Abacus off day one, out of the box, is a very mature place and gives you something very quick without you having to reinvent the wheel. The aspect, of course, is leveraging standards like TOGAF, like Archimate. So again, Abacus has very good support for that, but you don't want to have to roll your own. You want to leverage the experience of all of your colleagues who've been, putting all this work into things like TOGAF and Archimate. Don't reinvent the wheel. Things that already exist, and start with something, because that gives you a single source of truth. We've all heard that phrase before, and it absolutely gives you something very quickly. So it's the fastest way to getting, as Gartner about this time to value, a mature repository that's got some framework support and gets you something that is accurate very quickly. I'm sure we've all been a few good men. That challenge, can the rest of your business handle the truth? That's all the challenge with this, is when you're forcing people to commit things to paper, or in this case to a repository, you're forcing people and challenging the way they see things. Are 500 applications? Are there 400 applications? What's an application altogether? Is that Excel spreadsheet we use, is that an application? So all of those questions need to be worked through to come to a source of truth that people can trust. But really, something is better than nothing. Even if it's wrong, it's still useful. The second quick win that we've identified, I'm sure you recognise that. I hope you do. It's Australia's platypus. The idea here is you need to adapt or you will die. Basically, the metaphor here with the platypus, 200 years ago, when explorers were bringing back specimens of the platypus, people thought it was a hoax. People didn't believe it. They thought, no way, something exists that has, a bill, webbed feet like a duck, a body like an otter, a tail like a beaver. There was just no way this thing was real. They were sure it had been, Frankenstein together. And of course, we all know now that it's real. They started bringing some live specimens back about 100 years ago, and the proof was in the pudding. Why was there such an animal like this? So the platypus developed in obviously an isolated environment in Australia, and it adapted perfectly to its environment. Some of the facts that you may or may not know about the platypus, that actual bill, so this duck bill of it, it actually has electrosensitivity to it. The width of the bill, so it uses the electrosensitivity in its bill to detect the muscle contractions in the prey that it's searching for. The width to that enables the platypus to triangulate very accurately to where the prey is. Who would have thought? It is a mammal, so it's one of only two egg-laying mammals in the world, the other one being the echidna, again in Australia. And not surprisingly, for a mammal that lives in the water, you give birth to live young, they're in a bit of trouble. They're going to drown. So not surprisingly, developed a technique to lay eggs, and then obviously get those eggs onto the shore where they could then hatch in safety. Surprisingly, it has poisonous spurs. It's one of the most deadly creatures in Australia. I'm sure you guys hear about all the snakes and the spiders, but absolutely the platypus is one of the most deadly animals in Australia. With it's got these poisonous spurs on its back feet, so don't go picking one up if you find one. It doesn't have a stomach. It evolved to be so efficient. Its whole digestive system and the diet that it has is so finely tuned now that it doesn't even have a stomach. It does why I want to process what it eats. So a very massive animal. I hope you all have new respect for the platypus. But the fundamental message here is you need to adapt or you're going to fail. So in our context, of course, customer trends change, goalposts move. Customer is always right. We have to take that opinion. Not your favorite framework, as much as I'm very passionate about TOGAF and Archimate. They may not be appropriate for your client. If you're working with a, let's say, DODAF client, it's going to want to use DODAF. Okay, so the framework's not always right. Okay, the customer is, and there are hundreds to choose from. So certainly don't push a framework down somebody's throat. Technical point of view, I can state here that Abacus is the only EA tool with a graph database backend. Okay, so technically, Abacus has the most configurable repository on the market. It lets you configure things on the fly. You can make 100 frameworks very quickly. You add an unlimited number of properties. You're not having to choose in a relational database a different table depending on which type of application you want, because it's been pre-configured with a certain set of properties. You absolutely configure these things or use existing hybrids and mash them together. You can build dynamic queries on the fly to query the data sets that you have. So a database approach is fundamental to empowering an adaptable way of thinking. Okay, I've got a little quick question for you here. I'm not going to ask you to throw it into that window of the Q&A, but I'll let you have a little think there. Who's that? I don't know if any of you recognise it. I think you will. Jeff Bezos. Okay. I did a photo where he didn't have his hair. You would have all recognised him. So this was certainly the last photo I found that he still has hair. It's from his high school yearbook. Bezos is the man who started Amazon, 25 years ago now, or 20 years ago. Okay, scenario. It's 2005. Okay, you're a lead enterprise architect or chief architect within Amazon. You're a book company back then, right? Jeff walks into your office and says, "I got a great idea. I think we should be the leading cloud infrastructure provider within 10 years." What do you think would you have just looked at him and gone, "You crazy"? Well, how that ended up. Amazon now has Amazon Web Services, and I'm sure you're all aware that it's a $7 billion a year business now. They make more money from Amazon Web Services than they do from selling books now. So CEO walks into your office and says, "I want us to pivot." What do we say? What do we say as architects? Are we adaptable? Are we willing to go with it? Or, unfortunately, are we the no police? Do we know? Obviously, you can't do that. You have to become a trusted advisor. You have to be willing to examine any scenario that comes across your desk. If you are willing to do that, I can assure you, you will deliver results faster because you're not going to be a blockage in the system. And I guarantee you, whatever framework you choose is going to be wrong. It's not going to be 100% fit for purpose, and it probably won't even be 50%. You certainly have to be adaptable, and if you don't do that, you're not going to get to a successful place very quickly. Okay? If we move now to the third of the quick wins. Okay? You to analyze, but don't overanalyze. Okay? This is Sigmund Freud here on his psychologist's couch. Be careful not to go down a rabbit warren or a black hole doing too much analysis. Okay? You absolutely have to always be pragmatic about how you give your advice, what ways you try to answer the questions that are put in front of you. Don't be afraid. There are simple, equational, and structural approaches that can be done very easily. You certainly don't have to, here in the UK, people talk about boiling the ocean. You don't have to do a very thorough and very complete analysis piece for it to be worthwhile. Remember that original statement we said, all models are useful. Sorry, all models are wrong, but some are useful. Okay? It doesn't matter how accurate your analysis is in the first instance. You need to just give something and refine that. Be iterative about that. Okay? Choose the low-hanging fruit, all those different approaches that we know. But you have to do analysis if you want to get some quick wins. It is possible to do cloud readiness assessments, health checks, modernization, all of these different things we day in and day out, things that can be done relatively easily, you might know that, can be done without much information, and it can be done in a matter of days and weeks. I'm not going to promise that it's a 99.99% correct cost analysis, but it's certainly going to be something that's valuable and the business sees the point of what you're doing. Okay? Absolutely analyze, but don't overanalyze. All caveats. Be careful not to confuse precision with accuracy. These are some of the kind of the measurement or metrics, mantras that you should become familiar with. I the wrong answer to 5 decimal places. So be careful, again, not to be too precise. May you lead with all the disclaimers around confidence intervals and saying, look, this is only 80% accurate, 70% accurate. Okay, not professing that it's 99.9% accurate. You look at rough order of magnitude recommendations, but absolutely, you need to measure something, anything. Now, there's a concept here which is worth talking about, because if we start looking to measurements and start looking to obviously put some KPIs back to the business, the obvious question then is, well, which KPIs do we look for and where do we get the data for them? What we've got to be very careful of here is not to be susceptible to what's referred to as operational bias, or basically what's known as streetlight effect. So there's a little joke. Indulge me for a second, I'll tell you the joke. So basically a policeman sees a drunk guy searching for something under a streetlight, and he asks what the drunk has lost. Well, I've lost my keys. Okay, they both start looking under the streetlight together. After a few minutes, the policeman says, "Look, are you sure you lost them here?" And the drunk says, "No, I lost them in the park." And the policeman goes, "Well, why are we searching here?" And the drunk says, "Well, this is where there's light." Be careful not to just look where you know you can look. Absolutely. Finding things in other areas that you didn't expect is some of the most valuable acts to doing analytics. And absolutely, what you might be surprised to hear again is that we do we do analysis-ready maturity assessment for our customers at a 3-month time. You remember you heard that 60%, 70% are deployed within 3 months, and then 90% within 6. Well, at 3 months, we run what we call an analysis-ready assessment, and typically that's a pass grade. So over 50% indeed ready to do a simulations and start getting some numbers, and that's within 3 months. So they're more or less getting that for free. You get to pass and start doing all this analytics very quickly. All right, the fourth of the quick wins that I want to share with you guys today is what we talk about as basically visualization. And we all like pie, I guess, is the subtitle to this. So some have probably read this already. I'm not sure how clearly it's presenting, so I'll read it out in case you can't. So you've got Dilbert there, of course. It's not a good presentation. You have Dilbert. And he said, "I didn't have anything useful to say, so I made this pie chart." And then a pointy head boss there is, "Ooh," and all his colleagues, "Ooh, it must be true because it's pie." And Dilbert's thinking to himself, "Well, that worked a bit too well." And they're all saying, "I put my life and fortune to the pie." So absolutely be careful. Pie charts are fantastic. They're a really good way of starting to have an engaged dialogue with the business. But absolutely, and there's a really good article here by Stephen Few, save the pies for dessert. Don't get too overdone with what you can do with a pie chart, okay? Start to think fundamentally about the other ways you might present work you're doing. Don't just draw lots of diagrams, okay? Humble pie chart absolutely has its place and allows you to make decisions. So pie charts, and we'll start looking at a few of the others, and different visualization techniques are fundamental to you being successful in the business and obviously being recognized as a value enabler than a cost center. Around this, I'm sure you appreciate there's a URL down the bottom here for some articles and white papers and things about this, particularly giving guidance about what sort of chart should you choose, what sort of things, visualization should you produce. So I'll leave you to go and browse that in your own time. But one of the headlines here is the statement I put in here, which is, while reporting is of course necessary, and often you'll have a regulatory requirement for that, the type of data usage that we know is needed to navigate the future landscapes and the future roadmaps ahead, it's never going to be printed out. Okay, they're immersive visualizations, they're interactive, they are of course dynamic. Okay, not going to be something that's printed out into a report. Okay, they might even be three-dimensional, and we'll look at those in a sec. This time it's called a chord diagram. You might remember it as a cat's cradle kind of view that you used to do in your childhood. What it basically is looking at is the interrelationships between things. Okay, around the circumference of this circle, you've got a whole lot of different entities. It doesn't really matter what the entities are. They can be applications, they could be goals and objectives, they can be projects. Really it doesn't matter from the enterprise repository's point of view. But what we're looking at now are what relationships you might have with other things that you may or may not have known. Okay, these relationships can be sized, so like the thickness of the connection can change depending on how strong and deep that relationship is, or indeed maybe how much, if this is a cost view, you're looking at how much cost is attributed to somewhere else, you might use the thickness of the line to show how much cost is flowing in different directions around your business. The direction is important. That could be, again, color here, red being in one direction, green in the opposite direction. But fundamentally, it's allowing you to more or less find, you often hear that there's a ball of spaghetti or a ball of string, or bowl of spaghetti is the kind of the spaghetti architecture you hear about. There are different techniques called edge bundling. So there's various techniques you can use that will find the actual relationships between things rather than just staring at a very complicated, spaghetti view. So core diagrams are absolutely one of the primary ways you should visualize things to start to get some understanding. I'm sure you're all familiar with tree maps. They're essentially hierarchical boxes within boxes doing things. Some really good things about tree maps is from a efficiency point of view, they're a rectangle, and so they fit on your screen perfectly, regardless of what your aspect ratio of your screen is, whether you're on your iPhone or whether you're on your tablet or on your desktop. They're a rectangle, so there's no wasted white space. I mean, if you look at that chord diagram on the left, the corners are wasted. There's none of value being shown there. Now, a map has, of course, at least two other dimensions that you're showing here. So you're showing size of the boxes, okay, and that's trying to indicate something to give you attract your attention, and of course color. So like a large red box might mean something, okay. Now, to give you kind of feeling of how powerful these might be, there's over 1,000 boxes on the diagram there. 1,000. Now, you can't see lots of them because they're very small, and the designer of this view has decided that they're insignificant and not worthy of your attention, but they're still there. And when you zoom in, you can see them down in the bottom right-hand corner of each of those boxes. There's obviously hierarchy here, so going 2 levels of hierarchy. Okay, so this is my application landscape of 1,000 applications. How much each application costs, that might be the size of the box, and what our recommendation going forward is for that application in terms of whether we think we should retire it or not. A really powerful view. The tree maps are a great way of seeing a lot of information and empowering people to start to make decisions. The last one I'm going to show you here is, we talk about right at the start there that decisions that we need to make rely on visualizations that are not going to be printed out. So this allows you to do 3D visualization of systems. It's a fantastic thing to use. It can be very fun and wake you up on an afternoon's day of flying through your enterprise, but it starts to show you the amazing simplicity and elegance of your business, even if there are hundreds of thousands of entities. Okay, information hiding, you're using economies of scale to zoom in and see things that may or may not be of interest to you. It's a fantastic way. I can assure you can fit far more information in a 3-dimensional view than you'll ever do in a 2-dimensional view. Okay. Color these and size these and do some fun things to them. Now, you can't print them into a report, of course, so they're basically for investigative purposes. You may ultimately then take any of these visualizations to produce a more traditional report that someone can then sign off on. So that still has its place. Your governance process of people signing off on things and those artifacts, as they're known in TOGAF, the deliverables being produced from a repository, absolutely has its place. But an analyst, as an architect, you need to use things like this to be able to absolutely guide the business on what decisions they should make. This me to my 5th of the quick wins for architects and enterprise architects. Ready, steady, roadmap. Absolutely, road mapping is first and foremost what we should be thinking about as enterprise architects. You absolutely should be thinking about how quickly can I make a roadmap for a part of business, for one of our technology lines, for one geographies, anything like that. It's fundamental to how the business perceives us as enterprise architects and what we absolutely should be producing as architects. Now, I presented at open webinars before and open group events before a lot about road mapping. It's a bit of my my bugbear. It's what I'm always on the pulpit, pitching: roadmap. We decompose that into 4 types of roadmaps that you should sort of look to try and produce, one or more of those. Again, the URL at the bottom here, that the slides, click the link. Go and have a read of this. There's lots of treaties we've given of the different times and situations you may use one over the other, the advantages and disadvantages of each, and absolutely commentary about how quickly you can produce these things and how accurate they may be. I haven't to go into all 4 of them again today, and needs to say that before, and you can sit through those presentations from before. But what it talks about is these 4 types. The first one is nagging with recommendations and heat maps. Okay. That's one I'll look at a bit more, so I'll elaborate on that in a sec. The life cycle properties and Gantt charts, they're the ones you may be more familiar with, where you're showing, the horizontal bars in what's called a Gantt chart, like a pro chart of, like the life cycles of things. There's what's referred to as a ripple effect or a dynamic roadmap, where you're looking at the interdependencies between things and how, putting a stop on a project is going to affect the delivery of some capability, which then might, cascade its way through your organization and have ripple effect, have a ripple effect of, making a simple decision somewhere, and obviously what effect that may have, all the way through to what we pioneer as what we call multiple architectures. So this is having in TOGAF what's referred to as an architecture landscape. So you have multiple architectures in your repository. You have as is, to be, you have transition architectures, you have all these different things, and they're all discrete things that you can do trade-off analysis and gap analysis and explore each of them independently and, of course, together to look at ultimately what is the roadmap or the course for your business going from point A to point B. I'm not going to go into those too much. I've done those in previous webinars, and we can do content, and there's a URL there. I'll focus on this tagging with recommendations and heat maps, because absolutely these are the sort of things you can produce. Indeed, we've had many clients produce these sort of things in a matter of days and weeks. Okay, I've given case study presentations on these things before. I can give you these again. So Birmingham City Council, there's an example I presented on, it was probably years ago now, where they did this stuff very quickly. Okay, so one roadmap. Right? What it looks at is the what. Fundamentally, it's just looking at what is going to change. What is the future going to look like? Okay? It doesn't have much to say about when. It doesn't much to say about who's going to do it. It doesn't say much about why. It doesn't say, many of the other dimensions that roadmaps can have, and those other types of roadmaps do address. But it does make a statement of what the future is recommended to look like. Okay. There's methods here that you probably are familiar with. There's one that's called the 4 R's. It talks about retain, redesign, refresh, and retire. Okay, it's a typical quadrant-based approach. The one you may have heard of is time, which stands for tolerate, invest, moderate, and eliminate. There are essentially two different ways of categorizing the future state for things. Not necessarily applications, maybe capabilities, maybe departments, anything that you're looking at, but categorizing what your recommendation is for those things in the future. And absolutely a roadmap. Then to present those one or two ways. You either present them using a heat map. Okay, there's lots of talk about how heat maps can be done, whether it's a capability map where you color a capability. Again, you might color a capability to show that capability is being retired or eliminated. You might color it orange or yellow to show it's being refreshed, redesigned, or migrated. And of course, you might leave it green if it's going to be tolerated or retained. Now, one of the critical things here as an enterprise architect is you can actually determine the future state recommendation for capabilities or any of the aspects of your business due to the relationships that aspect has with other parts of your business. So it shouldn't be too surprising that if you've made statements about your application roadmap or your application portfolio, and you're saying that, hey, we're going to do tech refresh here and retire these and tolerate things, again, you can aggregate those recommendations up to the capabilities that these applications support. Okay, you're looking to very quickly leverage those sorts of analyses you do, and absolutely now start to present them in some very simple views, like a capability map. The other one, which again, we all worship the pie chart. Well, absolutely, bubble charts are your stock trade when you're starting out on doing road mapping. Before you even do a Gantt chart, okay, a bubble chart is absolutely the first thing you should look to produce, whether it's, again, a business fit versus a technology fit dimension, whether it's value versus risk. TOGAF has guidance on this called a business value assessment. They call it a matrix, but it's a bubble chart. Just looking at least two dimensions, so the X versus Y, but then absolutely showing maybe the size of the project or the cost of the application or the risk in the radius of the bubbles, and the color can again be the recommendation you're doing now about what you think you should do. Okay, so bubble charts, KD maps or heat maps, absolutely as stock and trade for doing these type 1 roadmaps. Now, a couple of examples I've got time to show you. Again, these have been presented before. I can send you the case study documentation. We can send links to Actually, these ones weren't recorded. Sorry, they were done in person at own group events in the past. But here's a very simple snapshot of some work that was done for London Underground almost 10 years ago now. I won't go into the details of the project. Again, we can send you the case study behind this. Looking at here are, in this case, applications. Okay, so each bubble represents an application. It is only one business unit. Okay, so many business units, many thousands of applications, of course. And what you're looking at, I'm sure you can read on the left axis there, is the value of the application was assessed. Okay, so the higher up the chart, the higher the value of the application. And then the x-axis is actually a priority. Okay, so in some ways that actually is a bit of a time dimension, like a win, because higher priority applications you advocate and you would hope are ones that are getting addressed first, but we're not necessarily saying when, and we're not saying that we're going to in the next 6 months. We're also not necessarily going to do them. This is just a recommendation from the architecture team. The color here is, again, using the 4 R's methodology. They indeed had 7 R's, and I won't go into the some of them. That's again in a presentation we've done before, but you can see the basics of it. There's some red bubbles, which are things that should be retired. Some green are things that should be this really strong green are things that should be traded for now, but should be revisited sometime in the future. And then the kind of the lime green ones and other ones, they're things that should be being replaced, and orange ones, things that should be being renovated or refreshed. But absolutely, making a statement about the future of something as a chart. Again, this didn't take a lot of work. It was with all caveats around how accurate this was, but it absolutely started to facilitate discussions with the business to make absolute decisions and engage and be seen to be delivering value very quickly. This is AXA, big insurance company. This was presented by a colleague of ours, by AXA themselves at a Paris event a couple of years ago. So again, go and dig out the slides for this, but we help them do this work. And so again, absolutely, you're looking at albeit French, a very similar approach where you're looking at the kind of the strategic value as the verbal dimension there. So how valuable do we perceive this, in this case again, applications to be, versus across how adequate. So that was like a technical kind of adequacy measure. You hear that there's not too many that are being decommissioned, so that's the green color. If you look at the legend there, these mostly areas that we're looking to either be being tolerated, which is what a white one is, being transformed, which is like repurposed or replatformed, which is green, versus being replaced. Okay, so rather than necessarily talking about shutting down and then never needing it in the future, we're saying that no, we still need these capabilities, so we're going to replace this with, as you can imagine, because of the vertical dimension, you can see it's the commodity ones. Some of the bespoke applications are going to be replaced with standard off-the-shelf ones. Okay, so there was obviously that mandate to try and go off the rather than roll your own. Certainly, the same concept, Type 1 roadmap, as we would call it. It's talking about the future, it's making recommendations, and is produced incredibly quickly. We're talking in a matter of weeks here. This is not something that you should be delaying at all. And absolutely, if you go right back to the time to value statements that I made, you should be making these things within the first 3 to 6 months. There is no reason not to expect that. Don't start arguing about meta models and going down that dark hole. You've got an adaptable tool, right? So just start with something and then let it grow over time, but get some things out of it very quickly. Second slide. Just to recap, the quick wins that we've gone through is absolutely something is better than nothing. Let best practice. Take meta models that already exist. Don't necessarily invent your own. Use Archimate. Whatever your designs are. It's never right. All are wrong. Useful, so accept that you're going to adapt the way you do things, but also be adaptable yourself. When Jeff Bezos walks into your office, don't say no. We're all in this together, right? You're part of the solution. About metrics. Metrics are a key to being successful. It opens up the communication in a language that business understands. You can talk about numbers. Don't get bogged down between precision. Don't talk about obviously 99.9%. Absolutely give rough order of magnitude, and of course beware of that the street-like effect. Don't tell the business what they're expecting to hear. It's great when you're consultancy, but not so great when you're in-house EA team. Vision, they're not going to understand if you put up some A0 plots. of, using, some notion that you think's cool, right? Give them eye charts, give them bubble charts, give them immersive ways they can understand. Make this an on-demand. Use the cloud, licenses, the portable licenses you've got on your tablets. Use those to write in the meeting right there and then show someone what you're talking about. Don't tell them I'll give you a report in 6 months. And absolutely about producing roadmaps. It's the number one thing that you guys need to be focused on, trying to make as quickly as you can for the business to see you as being valuable. That's it. There's some details, obviously, for the company and for myself personally. Drop me an email, of course, anytime. I can obviously provide the slides. I mean, we'll have these slides available tomorrow. So that's my 40 minutes. It looks like I stuck to time pretty well to give us some time for questions. And yeah, no, I haven't been keeping track of them. But Simon, it's back to you. You've got the questions I suspect have you to go through.
We've got a few. Thank you, Tim. And just let's reiterate I've had a number of people asking for slides. How do you intend to make the slides available, Tim?
That's fine. I mean, we can send them back. Simon, if you want to drop me, who asks you, or if people want to contact me directly on that email address there, we'll send them out as a PDF. Know that you're recording this, so of course, I think you do that, don't you, Simon? You send out a link to the recording so you can share that with your colleagues. But yep, slides, fine. Yep, I can provide those to people as a PDF. Just drop me an email or drop Simon an email, of course.
That's happy to act as a go-between. So yes, everyone will have my email address in today's host. So if you'd like a copy of Tim's slides, feel free to send me an email and I'll liaise with Tim and we'll make sure. All right, so we do have a question in, Tim. This is from, and by the way, everyone, this is a great opportunity now to submit your questions into the QA text facility. This question is from Colin. How do you recommend it? How do you recommend eliciting the judgments on each dimension of analysis, and for example, importance to the business?
Yeah, say it again. I missed the start of that, so the audio dropped out. So how do I recommend?
How do you recommend eliciting the judgments on each dimension of analysis?
Right. So I missed that eliciting word. That's what I went through. Yeah, look, it is a great question. And certainly when we go back and talk about doing analysis quickly, some of the, I'm going to use the word research, but certainly some of the work that we've done in the past has been about, there are techniques by which you can, I'll use the word elicit, it's a great, when we talk about requirements and what we're talking about, non-functional requirements now, not functional requirements. I can throw a standard out there. There's an IEEE standard, 1061. 1061, so write that down. I helped write it. Basically, there are very formal processes out there by which you can help a business to determine what non-functional requirements they should be using. Each business is not the same. Okay, if you're a fast-moving consumer goods company, time to market is a KPI that matters, a lot more to you than if you're, let's say, a government department where some quality or regulatory compliance may be more important. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you that there is a standard set of metrics that works for every company, because fundamentally every company is different, and in some ways they all have different drivers. There are 76 metrics. There you go. That's another piece of work we've done. So I can tell you there's 76 different types of metrics you can look to measure for companies, and those metrics decompose into sub-metrics. And obviously there are some common ones and some popular ones. I can assure you that things like cost, financial metrics are common. Everyone has that. Speaking on behalf of Evolution and Abacus, we have out-of-the-box cost simulators. And remember, I talked about that maturity assessment, analytics ready. You'll find actually that architectures already can be making statements about cost very quickly. You don't need to go to the nth degree to build an accurate cost model. Okay, cost is certainly one, but there are techniques by which you can go and engage with the business and start to understand the KPIs they care about. Now, I also hope that that stuff has already been thought about a little bit. So normally you look at business cases and you look at how companies make their decisions about which projects to fund. They'll often already state what some of the KPIs are that need to be tested for a future state of business. Now, of course, there's a return on investment usually, but there'll often be some other KPIs. There'll be statements about, we are going out or whatever, and that's everything's going to the cloud. So guess what? The cloud readiness or the cloud compliance of something in the future is then one of the metrics you're going to need to be calculating, because there's that stated objective as a non-functional requirement in already the decision-making process. So go and get a hold of a business case in your company. You'll probably find there's a table somewhere at the start of it which rates different metrics or different factors or different KPIs, whatever it may be called, as a way to guide and instruct, hopefully people to aim the system, of course, and make the numbers, but needs to say it's to help people form their opinion. It helps you as an architect form your opinion on what metrics you need to start to calculate. So, yeah.
That's great, thanks. Question from, well, it's a question and a comment, I'm guessing, from Shrikant. And he says, isn't it also important to adapt a twin-sided factor? And he goes on to say, for example, customers also need to adapt to the latest technology trends, depending on what we mean by the term customer there, Tim.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Sorry, what the commenter means. I mean, even back to the, there was that statement I made, the customer's always right kind of thing. So look, without a doubt, I guess that was implicit in what I said, hopefully, in so much as the goalposts move. You wouldn't, the Jesus example, right? You think you're going perfectly well as a book company, and then, the CEO walks in with a bright idea of some pivot they want to do, right? So absolutely, the customer, indeed, what that means, if you're talking about the enterprise architect's customer, so the rest of the business, they need to, default, the only constant in life is change. We all know those like one-liners. So absolutely, they're going to be changing. They're going to be changing their mind. They're going to be adapting as it is in terms of what they're wanting to do as a business, and that's going to be coming. That's going to be the demand side of things to us as architects, because we're going to be dealing with different ideas, different suggestions, different strategies, and having to reconcile those within the existing set and not the no police. So that's one side of it. I think the idea is, I guess it's a fair comment that trying to show things like chord diagrams and tree maps and three-dimensional views, going to be some new things that we're going to be taking to the business as architects. Okay, that's a fact. We've been doing this for 20 years, right? There's absolutely some adaptation that the business needs to take to learn how to make sense of work that we're producing. Okay, we're at the vanguard of helping businesses make decisions, right? We're doing this for 20 years. We've got prestige up the wazoo, right? We are the ones who are helping people hopefully see a new way of doing things. Absolutely. The tail needs to wag the dog. The business needs to become receptive to this new way of seeing things. Not a big laborious, full-page, business case document. You should be able to turn back these things very interactively with them and should be able to adapt the sort of new style of information we're putting to them. Okay, so that question, and I guess
that's great, Tim. And there's a question here that I'd like to lead on from that, because and this is from Mike, and he's saying, how do you get across the point that is planning and modelling and engineering design that most IT folks want to jump into?
Okay. I don't know if I have a compelling answer to this, because I agree. It's an age-old challenge we've had for 50 years now. I've been fighting the battle. You guys would know the books, EA's Strategy by Jeannie and Ross from MIT Sloan. Fundamentally, I'm going to be what I say here, but I think we have a problem in the fact that we even use the architecture word in enterprise architecture. I find that as soon as you use the word architecture word, you're tarred with an IT brush, and absolutely, anyone calls themselves, Feskins from IP coins the phrase, I am what I do, architect. So everyone's an architect, right? What they do. So what you tend to find is the technical architects, they call themselves technical architects now, start to think that, that's enterprise architecture. Now, of course, it's just one domain, and strategy is one of the equally important domains with technology. So unfortunately, there's a bit of a branding issue there, architecture, because you could pretty much replace the word architecture with strategy across everything. And we're a bit guilty of it. Like I say, in the Open Group, it's called the Open Group Architecture Framework, right? It's absolutely got the A word in it. So yeah, we certainly spend a fair bit of our time trying not to use the architecture word. There's a really good sort of so what. It's basically when you're trying to explain to someone like the 30-second pitch, where we actually don't even use the word architect or architecture. Okay, we'll often use the word structure instead of architecture, just because it positions things a bit neutrally in someone's mind. Okay, so that's something that we all have to do together. Obviously it's a marketing challenge that we all have. We have to position ourselves right so that people start to sit in a certain light, and that also means, like I'm saying here with these quick wins, that doesn't mean producing 200 diagrams for someone. That's not necessarily going to get your message across, and not going to necessarily improve the perception of our profession. Starting to give people, at the same time, don't pie charts either. They'll probably underwhelm them too. But the way that we need to present ourselves as professionals that hopefully pulls us out of the IT pigeonhole.
That's Tim. Vanessa is asking, she says, you said you should keep to rough numbers. How do you balance between over-analysis and losing your credibility? And she said, for example, that is, if the client doesn't believe your numbers, they believe anything else you say.
No, absolutely. And look, a fantastic question, and absolutely it's something I've been dealing with for more than 20 years. So look, credibility is everything. If you're going to trust a trusted advisor, well, by definition, you're hopefully credible. So first and foremost, you need to, whenever you have a conversation with someone about numbers, 95% of statistics are made up on the spot, right? All those one-liners. You need to give some disclaimers, right? You by saying, look, with the amount, this is the quality time cost trade-off, the holy trinity of anything, right? Quality versus time versus cost. You all preface what you do with saying, with the amount of time I've had, with the info being provided, with the amount of money you've paid me, or the quality of the team that I've got, here's the quality of the recommendation I'm going to give to you, right? So you disclaimer, and hopefully that's not only 20% confident, because if that's the answer, you're better to say nothing, because you're exactly right. It could actually be wrong, okay? So always have some sort of minimum bar by which you do start to engage with the business. Okay, so your disclaimer is still going to say, look, I'm not 9% of this, I'm not 80% sure of this, I'm only 70% sure of this. Okay, but it should be a pass mark. You remember we talked about this assessment rating we do? Absolutely. If we've done a lot of work, we've been doing this 20 years, right? So we've built up confidence levels. We know, and we can do a security assessment that basically will tell how accurate is the recommendation going to be, depending on the quality of the information coming in. Okay, and you'll be surprised how you may you do get accurate recommendations, so more than 50%, 60% accurate recommendations with a very small amount of information. Okay, so absolutely, aside from our liability insurance is not necessarily so high that you're going to bet your house on it, but absolutely, most of our clients, hand on their heart, say, look, this is accurate enough for you to make a decision. Now, the decision may, of course, just be, hey, this is a pretty big decision, so we need to do a bit more work. I need that certainty to be 90% or 80%, so it becomes iterative, right? But you've not the business in a discussion where you say, look, we think you should do this, and we think you should with a 60% confidence level. And they go, okay, you're Amazon and you're about to become a cloud service provider. And he goes, all right, you got 3 months, go and get 90% confident. Right? So absolutely, it's opening up a dialogue, which is an interactive discussion, and you're not now a black hole where nothing comes out for 6 months. And hopefully, you've still got your credibility, because, like I say, you've hopefully positioned your recommendation well enough that, it's completely wrong. Now, obviously, you want to city check things a little bit, road test it a little bit, kind of get some glimpses along the way. Be careful about the streetlight effect, that observational bias, though. Don't just tell them what they want to hear, and don't look where you think that they think there's fires. Okay, so you need to use some independence there, but absolutely you should have a pretty good barometer of what the business is expecting and what they're going to believe you say to them. Okay, question. It's a philosophical question. It's one that, whatever you want to say, scientists have, dealt with for thousands of years, and we've had to try to do it in our context for, certainly 20. So it's a work in progress.
Tim, that's great. We've got a couple of questions specifically about abacus, so I'm just going to join those two to get those together. Start off with the first one from Victor, and he's asking, does abacus have possibilities to bring relationships between capabilities and IT systems for or automating those capabilities?
Yes, I mean, it's certainly, I can give the one answer, which is yes. There's many frameworks, so many of those frameworks do that directly. So certainly things like we have a hybrid that that mashes together kind of TOGAF and BPMN and a few other standards. So those sort of ones do. When you look at some standard frameworks like TOGAF, okay, they do have some hidden layers there. Okay, it's in indirect relationships, so it goes via something else. Okay, but absolutely, there's again, it's depends which framework you choose, but we have dare I say tens, if not hundreds, of frameworks. The AS framework, which is the one we recommend to people where they're agnostic about what framework it is. We don't charge anything for any of our frameworks. They're all freely available, so that we've got no extra grind. But the Abacus framework, which is our kind of embodiment, our best practices, yes, it has absolutely a direct relationship. I can just called users, a capability uses an application, or uses a platform service, or a capability uses a process. There's a user relationship that we have there.
And the second question on that is, and this is from Rick, is it possible to get started with EA using Abacus with just one person?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where I don't know what I said. So in the simplest sense, I'd tell you, Rick, go to our website. You can download a trial right now, and you're using it, in whatever 20 minutes. So certainly we support single people. No problem with that. All the way up to, of course, we've got deployments with hundreds, if not thousands, of people. So that's fine. Yeah, you saw the time value. It's very easy to deploy. Most of our people are up and running straight away. That's of course you're working in what we would refer to as a standalone mode. You haven't had to deploy a server or anything like that. Even in cloud, you can work standalone. Obviously, you can have on-premise or in the cloud. Absolutely, it's very easy to get up and running as a single person. No trouble.
Just got one more question here, and I think you may have touched on it, Tim, but this is from Juan, just asking, please comment on the analysis capabilities in Abacus, for example, TOGAF EA model.
Yeah, it's a big question that we can't answer in a minute completely. Analysis obviously is a reasonably I don't want to say ambiguous, but it means many things to many people. So analysis in the simplest sense might just mean essentially what people refer to as impact analysis. You're just looking for the structural dependencies that things have. Okay, so the framework has that. So if you choose something like TOGAF, just like we were talking about from the meta model point of view, there's a content meta model in TOGAF, and it has 30 odd, 40 odd entity types with relationships between them. You can start to do what's referred to as impact analysis by saying, hey, I've got a capability here. What things are affected by that capability, which is obviously a relationship, and then you can cascade that relationship, and it's more or less like a degrees of separation way of understanding things. So that can be visualized. You can have different tree ways of visualizing that, and other ways. And you saw the chord diagram already. So there's ways of understanding the impact analysis of making a change somewhere. That's very qualitative, right? So you're just sort of saying what's going to be impacted and all that sort of stuff. Not doing anything that's necessarily a metrics-based analysis. Okay. Now, when you start stepping into the metrics-based way of doing things, TOGAF does have attributes in it. Okay. Certainly attributes in the TOGAF content meta model out of the box that lend themselves to you doing quantitative analysis. And we've got those already. So you can do different complexity analysis and cost analyses out of the box with TOGAF already because of the attributes that it has. Fortunately, Archimate doesn't have any metrics, any attributes out of the box, right? So the Archimate standard as it is much lighter on the analysis potential out of the box. We've been using Archimate for enough years that, of course, we've augmented the standard with lots of attributes that we know are beneficial to doing actual metrics-based analysis. So, differing degrees. Again, we can send you. There's a whole white paper we've got which talks about all frameworks are not created equal. And it absolutely talks about what things you can do with each framework, including how analysis ready is each framework. So I can tell you that TOGAF is analysis ready to some degree. We've of course mashed frameworks together into what we call Abacus framework, which is analysis ready for a whole slew of different approaches. Anyway, like I said, that's my 1 minute answer, 2 minute answer to that. And I think, Simon, how are we time? I know it's top of the hour.
We're over, and I had said that.
Sorry.
Last question.
Yep.
But I'd like to end on this question because
Okay.
I think with your experience,
Right.
you may have something to partake here. I mean, Mohammed's asking, what is required to gain and keep client trust?
That's not a 1 minute question, Simon. I'm going to have to. That's over a beer conversation. Look, what's required to get client trust? I'm going to go back to that other question about credibility. So you need to first and foremost produce something quickly. So you need to get something back to your stakeholders within 3 to 6 months. Okay, if you do that, they're already starting to be a bit suspicious about whether they're pouring money, into a black hole. Okay, so first and foremost, you need to be responsive. So you need to get things back quickly within 3 to 6 months, which is why obviously I'm putting these sort of slide decks that hopefully help you guys get messages back. See, and absolutely back to that point about credibility, be careful what you get back to them within 3 to 6 months because you don't want to give them the wrong answer. I give you the wrong answer to 5 decimal places, right? So don't confuse precision with accuracy. So make sure whatever you're putting back to them is prefaced with disclaimers and is boxed in terms of, it's only 70% accurate. You definitely do enough humility and say, look, I'm not digging here. I'm not saying we have to do this. I'm just saying, look, the analysis I've done with the time I have is of this quality. But help me to obviously make it more accurate if this is an important decision for you. So fundamentally, being responsive, but then being interactive to increase your accuracy. Should I answer to that one?
That's
Simon?
Brilliant, Tim. Sorry, I set you up with that last question.
That's right.
Well, as said, this is a great time to end today's presentation. Once again, Tim, thank you for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and please do join us again on our future webinars. So thanks a lot then, Tim.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.